Between 1939 and 1945, over 70 million people died. But what if I told you that 5 inventions, 5 weapons, changed the entire trajectory of World War II, and most people have never heard of some of them? Today, we're not talking about the obvious choices. Not the atomic bomb. That came too late. Not the machine gun or the aircraft carrier. Those were already proven in World War I. We're talking about the weapons that changed the rules. The innovations that took enemies by surprise. The technologies that generals didn't understand at first, but that ultimately determined who would win and who would lose. Some saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Others killed without ever being seen. And one was so secret that its true impact wasn't revealed for 30 years after the war ended. This is the story of 5 weapons that changed World War II. Number 5. Chain-home radar. Let's start in the summer of 1940. Britain stands alone against Nazi Germany. France has fallen in just 6 weeks. The British Expeditionary Force barely escaped from Dunkirk. And now, Hermann Göring's Luftwaffe, the most powerful air force in the world, is preparing to pound Britain into submission. The Germans had over 2,600 aircraft. The RAF, just 640 fighters. The math was simple. Britain should lose, but they didn't. And the reason why involves tall steel towers, invisible waves, and a technology that was about to change warfare forever. In 1935, British scientist Robert Watson Watt had developed something extraordinary. A system that could detect aircraft from over 100 miles away using radio waves. They called it RDF, radio direction finding. We know it as radar. By 1940, Britain had constructed a chain of radar stations along its southern and eastern coasts. The system was called Chain Home, and it consisted of 350-foot tall transmission towers and 240-foot receiving towers. Here's why this mattered. Before radar, defending against air attack was a guessing game. You needed standing patrols burning fuel in the sky, hoping to spot bombers. Thousands of ground observers scanning the horizon. By the time you saw the enemy, it was often too late. Chain Home changed everything. British controllers could now see German formations assembling over France before they even crossed the Channel. They knew how many planes were coming, from which direction, and at what altitude. This meant RAF fighters could stay on the ground until needed, then scramble to intercept at the perfect moment. Pilots were fresher, fuel was conserved, and the Germans, they were baffled. During the Battle of Britain from July to October 1940, the Luftwaffe lost 1,977 aircraft. Göring couldn't understand it. His intelligence said Britain should be running out of fighters. But every day, RAF Hurricanes and Spitfires kept appearing, always in the right place, always at the right time. The German pilots called it the British miracle. It wasn't a miracle. It was radar. Without Chain Home, Britain likely would have lost air superiority. Without air superiority, Operation Sea Lion, the German invasion, might have succeeded. And without Britain in the war, D-Day never happens. The entire Western Front of World War II hinged on those steel towers and invisible radio waves. Radar was so important that by war's end, every major power was using it, in aircraft, ships, and ground installations. It's still the backbone of air defense today. Number 4, the T-34 tank, June 22, 1941. The largest invasion force in human history. 3 million German soldiers, 3,600 tanks, 2,700 aircraft, smashes into the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa has begun. The Wehrmacht expected to reach Moscow in 3 months, and for the first few weeks, it looked like they would. Then German tank crews encountered something that made their blood run cold. A Soviet tank that could shrug off their shells like raindrops, but could blow them apart at ranges they couldn't match. The Germans called it the T-34 shock. The T-34 medium tank, designed by Soviet engineer Mikhail Koshkin, entered production in 1940. On paper, it didn't seem revolutionary, but in practice, it was a masterpiece. First, the armor. The T-34 used sloped armor, angled at 60 degrees. This was brilliant because angled armor is effectively thicker than flat armor. A German shell that could penetrate 45 millimeters of flat armor would bounce off the T-34's 45 millimeter sloped armor. The effective protection was more like 90 millimeter. Second, the gun. The T-34 mounted a 76.2 millimeter main gun that could destroy any German tank in 1941 at ranges up to 1,000 meters. Meanwhile, the standard German Panzer III and I-4 struggled to penetrate the T-34 at all. Third, mobility. Wide tracks meant the T-34 could operate in mud and snow where German tanks got stuck. Its Christie suspension gave it exceptional cross-country speed, and its diesel engine, unlike German gasoline engines, was less likely to catch fire when hit. In November 1941, German General Ewald von Kleist wrote, "The finest tank in the world is the Russian T-34. This is a German general fighting against it, admitting his enemy had better equipment." German tank crews reported that their 37mm and 50mm guns were inadequate against the T-34. Panic set in. The Wehrmacht had to rush new tank designs, the Panther and Tiger, specifically to counter the T-34 threat. But here's what really mattered: production. The Soviets built over 84,000 T-34 tanks during the war, 84,000. By comparison, Germany built about 6,000 Panthers and just 1,347 Tigers. The T-34 wasn't perfect. Early models had poor visibility, cramped interiors, and low crew survival rates. But it was reliable, simple to maintain, and could be produced in massive quantities. The T-34 didn't just stop the German advance, it became the spearhead of the Soviet counteroffensive. At Kursk in 1943, at the Vistula Oder offensive in 1945, in the final assault on Berlin, T-34s were there. After the war, the T-34 became the most widely used tank in history, serving in 40 countries on 4 continents. It fought in Korea, Vietnam, and Middle Eastern conflicts for decades. The tank that shocked the Wehrmacht in 1941 ended the war by crushing the Third Reich beneath its treads. Number 3, the Higgins boat. Now here's a question. How do you land 150,000 soldiers on a hostile beach? This was the problem facing Allied planners in 1944. D-Day, the invasion of Normandy, required the largest amphibious assault in history. But here's the thing, they didn't have a good way to do it. Standard landing craft could only deposit troops on docks or piers. If you drove them onto a beach, they got stuck. Soldiers had to jump over the sides into deep water, making them easy targets. And forget about bringing vehicles or heavy equipment. The solution came from an unlikely source, a boat builder from New Orleans who'd never seen combat. Andrew Higgins ran a company building boats for oil prospectors in Louisiana swamps. His boats had a unique feature, a bow ramp that could drop down, allowing workers to drive equipment directly onto muddy shores. In 1941, the Marine Corps saw Higgins's design and had an idea. What if you could scale this up for military use? The result was the LCVP, landing craft, vehicle, personnel. You know it as the Higgins boat. The genius was in its simplicity. The Higgins boat was 36 feet long, made of plywood and steel, with a flat bottom that could run right up onto a beach. The bow ramp dropped down, and 36 soldiers could charge out in seconds, or a jeep, or a small artillery piece. Just as importantly, the boat could reverse off the beach and go back for more. Again and again. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, over 1,500 Higgins boats hit the beaches of Normandy. Omaha Beach, Utah Beach, Gold, Juneau Sword. All of them relied on Higgins boats to get troops ashore. Yes, casualties were horrific, especially at Omaha. But imagine if soldiers had to climb over the sides of boats into chest-deep water under machine gun fire instead of running down a ramp. The casualties would have been catastrophic. D-Day might have failed entirely. During the war, Higgins Industries built over 20,000 landing craft. They operated on every front: Normandy, Sicily, Anzio, Tarawa, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Anywhere the Allies needed to land on a hostile shore, Higgins boats were there. Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, said after the war, "Andrew Higgins is the man who won the war for us. If Higgins had not designed and built those landing craft, we never could have landed over an open beach. The whole strategy of the war would have been different." Think about that. The Supreme Commander credits one boat designer with enabling the entire Allied strategy in Europe and the Pacific. Without the Higgins boat, there's no D-Day. Without D-Day, there's no liberation of Western Europe. The war drags on for years, potentially ending with Soviet troops occupying all of Germany, or worse. A simple plywood boat with a drop-down ramp changed the course of history. Number 2, the P-51 Mustang. By 1943, the Allies had a serious problem. They could bomb Germany by night. The British RAF was doing that. But precision bombing in daylight. That was proving almost suicidal. American B-17 and B-24 bombers were getting slaughtered by German fighters. On one mission to Schweinfurt in October 1943, the Americans lost 60 bombers out of 291. That's a 20% loss rate. Unsustainable. The problem was simple. Existing fighter escorts didn't have the range to protect bombers all the way to targets deep in Germany. Over places like Berlin, the bombers were on their own. Then came a fighter plane that would change everything and save the strategic bombing campaign from failure. The P-51 Mustang was originally designed for the British in 1940 by North American Aviation. Early versions were okay. Good speed, decent handling. But the Allison engine gave poor performance at high altitude where bombers operated. Then someone had a brilliant idea. What if we put a British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine in an American airframe? The result, the P-51B and P-51D, was extraordinary. Suddenly, you had a fighter with the speed to catch German interceptors, the maneuverability to dogfight them, and most importantly, the range to escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. With external drop tanks, the P-51D had a combat radius of about 750 miles. That's 1,500 miles round trip. For comparison, the P-47 Thunderbolt, a good fighter, had a radius of about 475 miles. This 300-mile difference meant the Mustang could go places other fighters couldn't. And wherever the Mustang went, bomber losses dropped dramatically. In early 1944, P-51 groups began arriving in England. The Americans changed tactics. Instead of just protecting bombers, Mustang pilots were now ordered to aggressively hunt German fighters, even chase them back to their airfields and strafe them on the ground. German fighter pilot losses skyrocketed. The Luftwaffe was being bled dry. They had planes, but experienced pilots were dying faster than they could train replacements. By D-Day in June 1944, the Allies had total air superiority over France. German fighters couldn't even operate in daylight. This was directly due to the P-51's ability to clear the skies. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, famously said, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." Think about that. The head of the German Air Force admitting defeat because of one aircraft. The P-51 Mustang destroyed over 4,950 enemy aircraft in the air, more than any other Allied fighter in Europe. But its real impact was strategic. It made the Allied bombing campaign possible. Without long-range escort, the daylight bombing offensive would have failed. Germany's war industries would have continued operating. The pressure on the Eastern Front would have been reduced. The war would have lasted longer and cost more lives. The P-51 didn't just win battles in the air. It crippled Germany's ability to wage war at all. Number 1, the bomber machine. Now for number 1. And this is the weapon that might have had the biggest impact of all. Yet it didn't fire a shot. It didn't carry a bomb. Most people have never even heard of it. But it may have shortened the war by 2 years and saved millions of lives. We're talking about the bomb machine, the code-breaking computer developed at Bletchley Park. The Germans believed their Enigma cipher machine was unbreakable, and they had good reason to think so. The Enigma had 159 million possible settings. That's 159 quintillion combinations. Trying every combination manually would take longer than the age of the universe. But British mathematicians led by Alan Turing figured out a weakness. The Enigma machine couldn't encrypt a letter as itself. A could never be A, B could never be B. Turing and Gordon Welchman designed a machine called the bomb, an electromechanical computer that could test thousands of Enigma settings per hour, looking for contradictions. By 1945, over 200 bomber machines were operating at Bletchley Park, processing German military communications. The intelligence they produced was codenamed Ultra. Ultra intelligence affected every theater of the war. In the Atlantic, Bletchley Park decoded German U-boat positions, allowing convoys to avoid wolf packs. In 1941, the Allies were losing the Battle of the Atlantic. By 1943, with Ultra intelligence, they'd turned the tide. Churchill later said the U-boat threat was the only thing that truly frightened him during the war. In North Africa, Ultra revealed Rommel's supply situation and plans, helping Montgomery win at El Alamein. During D-Day, Ultra confirmed the Germans believed the invasion would come at Calais, not Normandy, allowing the deception to hold. In the Pacific, American codebreakers using similar techniques decoded Japanese naval messages, leading directly to the ambush at Midway, the turning point of the Pacific War. Here's the incredible part. The Enigma secret was kept classified until 1974. For nearly 30 years after the war, no one outside intelligence circles knew about Bletchley Park's achievement. Alan Turing, the mathematical genius who made it possible, died in 1954 without public recognition. He was persecuted for being gay. The same government he'd saved treated him like a criminal. Historians estimate Ultra shortened the war in Europe by 2 to 4 years. Eisenhower said Ultra intelligence was decisive to Allied victory. 2 to 4 years. Think about what that means. Millions of lives saved, in concentration camps, on battlefields, in bombed cities. The Holocaust ended years earlier. Soviet control of Europe was limited. The atomic bomb might never have been used. The bomber machine, a room-sized computer made of rotating drums and electrical circuits, may have been the single most impactful weapon of World War II. So there you have it. 5 weapons that changed World War II. Chain home radar, the invisible shield that saved Britain. The T-34 tank, the Soviet hammer that broke the Wehrmacht. The Higgins boat, the simple craft that made D-Day possible. The P-51 Mustang, the long-range fighter that won the air war. And the bomb machine, the secret computer that cracked the unbreakable code. What's fascinating is how different these weapons were. Some were brutally simple, plywood and a ramp. Others were cutting-edge technology, computers and radar that seemed like science fiction. But they all share something in common. They changed the rules. They solved problems that seemed unsolvable. And they proved that innovation, not just brute force, determines who wins and who loses. What do you think? Did we miss any crucial weapons? Should the atomic bomb have made the list despite coming late in the war? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more World War II history content.